Hello, everybody. Welcome to Story Time again from the Milledgeville Public Library of Illinois. The story we have for you today comes to us from England. It is from the area of Northumberland, which is just below the Scottish border. And this is the story of a brother and sister and how they helped one another in dangerous, difficult times. The story of the loathsome dragon. Once long ago, in Bamborough Castle, there lived a king and a queen, and they had two children. They had a son named Prince Richard, and they had a daughter named Princess Margaret. And the two children were as fair as the summer's morning. And as they grew up, they stayed just as beautiful, but they grew up to be just as kind and as brave as they were beautiful. Well, eventually, Prince Richard grew old enough that he decided it was time to go see the world, as princes do, and so he sailed away from his home, waving to his mother and father and his sister on the shore as he left. Sadly, just a few months later, the queen grew sick and she died. And for several years, the king and Princess Margaret kept each other company in their sorrow and their grief. And Margaret helped her father to rule the kingdom as best she could. Well, one day, the king went out hunting. And while he was out in the forest hunting, he got separated from the rest of the group, and he found someone in the forest. She thought she was rather a pretty young woman, but the truth is that while she was beautiful on the outside, on the inside, she was black-hearted, for she was an enchantress. And she saw that here she had a king in front of her, and so quickly she cast her spell upon him, and he fell madly in love with her in an instant, and married her there in the woods. And he sent a message back to his daughter, Princess Margaret, and he said, "I am bringing home a new queen." Now, Margaret was quite surprised at this, for she did not think that her father was the kind to do something rash, and he had never spoken of possibly taking a new queen before, but she knew her duty, and she was very happy that the message that she had gotten seemed to say that her father was very happy again, and that was really what she wanted the most in the whole wide world. And so she prepared an elegant reception for the king and his new bride. And when the new queen, came into the room, Princess Margaret curtsied to her very beautifully and offered her the keys to the castle. Now, it looked very nice as she did it, and it was a very, very good gesture. But the only thing that the enchantress noticed, that during the whole thing, the king was looking with pride and affection in his eyes on his beautiful daughter. And so the enchantress thought in her heart, for she was a very jealous woman, she thought in her heart, well, we shall see what he thinks of her tomorrow. And that very night, when everyone else in the castle was asleep, the enchantress got up and she went down to the dungeons and she began to cast her spell. 9 times 9, she crossed her arms in front of her. 3 times 3, she spoke the spell. Change love to fear, princess to dragon. Forevermore shall this be, unless Prince Richard, the king's own son, gives the beast kisses 3. And so it was that Princess Margaret went to sleep a beautiful princess and woke up the next morning as a loathsome dragon. And she crawled from her bed and out of the castle and up the nearby mountain until she got to the spindle stone, and she curled herself around it. And she sat there crying dragon tears. But unfortunately, dragons are rather large creatures. And, well, they're animals, just like any other animal on earth, and they get hungry and they need to eat. And because they're so big, they need to eat a lot. And so pretty soon, Princess Margaret just could not stay up there on top of the mountain anymore. And so the loathsome dragon took off from the mountain and flew over the countryside, killing and eating as much as she could find. Animals, cows and sheep, and even sometimes people if they were not careful. Well, very soon the people of the surrounding countryside became very frightened because there was a dragon and they didn't know how to get rid of it. And it was killing their flocks and their herds and even sometimes some of the people. And so they went to the wizard that lived in the town, and they called the wizard and they said, please, please, please look in your books and your magics and figure out how to get rid of this loathsome dragon. And so the wizard consulted all of his books and his scrolls of magic, and he did some little magics of his own. And then he went back to the people and he said, oh, people, here is the problem. The loathsome dragon is actually the Princess Margaret. She has been enchanted. So, the only one who can break the spell I have found by my magics is her brother, the Prince Richard. I think we need to send a message for him as soon as possible. For you see, if he does not save her, within a year, she will be a dragon forever. And they said, well, we shall have to send that message immediately. But in the meantime, what can we do? Prince Richard could be so far away by now that it will take him months to get here. And the dragon is killing all of our flocks and our herds. And we are not going to have anything to eat ourselves or anything to plow the fields with. What do we do? And the wizard said, well, if you take 7 cows and set them aside, and then every day, every night, we milk the cows and take all of that milk, don't lose a drop, all of that milk up to the spindle stone. And you know there is that trough near the foot of the spindle stone. You pour all of the milk into there. I think the milk of 7 cows should be enough to keep the dragon satisfied so that she will not have to come out and attack the herds and the flocks. And so the people did what the wizard said. They sent a message to Prince Richard to come quickly, for his sister had been enchanted into a dragon and only he could save her. And then they took the milk from 7 cows every night, a parade of people going up the mountain, and they poured all of that milk into the trough, and the dragon drank up all that milk, and it kept her satisfied so that she did not have to go out and attack the herds and the flocks. Well, as had been predicted, Prince Richard was quite a distance away by this time, and it took months for the message to reach him that his sister was in trouble and he needed to come back and save her. And when he did, he was so upset that he vowed that he would go and save his sister no matter what it took. And 33 of his men vowed it with him. And very quickly, as quickly as they safely could, they built themselves a ship, and they made sure that they protected themselves against any enchantments by making the keel out of magic rowan wood. Well, they set sail for home, and the keel of that ship helped them sail swift and true. And as they were growing near to the shores of England and to Bamborough Castle, the Queen heard about their approach, and she was not pleased. And so she worked her magics and called some evil spirits to her, and she sent them out across the sea to build up a great storm and sink the ship that had Prince Richard on it, for she did not want Princess Margaret to come back as a beautiful girl. She wanted to keep her as a loathsome dragon forever. Well, fortunately, the magical rowan wood keel of the ship protected Prince Richard and all of his men against the horrible storm that the evil spirits churned up. When the Queen heard about this, she said, "Oh ho, well, Prince Richard comes protected, does he? Well, let us see how he can do against his sister." And 9 times 9 she crossed her arms in front of her, and 3 times 3 she chanted her spell, and the dragon reluctantly came down from the spindle stone to do her bidding. And as Prince Richard's ship sailed in towards the harbor, the dragon came down through the town and out into the sea and blocked it from coming to land. And 3 times Prince Richard and the sailors tried to get past the dragon to get into the harbor so that they could safely get off the ship, but they could not get by. 3 times the dragon blocked them from getting into the harbor. And Prince Richard thought to himself, now the message must have been wrong. There is no way that this dragon could possibly be my sister. Margaret would not be against me like this. Well, eventually, the prince and his men realized they were not going to get into the harbor. The dragon was just going to get in their way. And so the prince ordered his men to turn the ship around and sail back out to sea. And up in the castle, the queen cackled with glee. She was so happy. The Prince Richard had 1 day left to save his sister before she would be a dragon forever, and he was leaving. So much for the brave prince, she said. Princess Margaret will be a dragon forever. And she went to have a nice little feast with some of her friends. Well, what the queen did not know, for she thought she had won and didn't bother to look any further, was that Prince Richard, of course, knew the coast better than she did, for he had grown up there and sailed up and down it many times when he was younger. And so he had not really sailed back out to sea, but had simply gone round and up the coast a bit, slipping into a little hidden cove and leaving his ship there. And he had walked across land and up to the Spindlestone. And carefully peeking around under the rock, he looked at the loathsome dragon and he thought, that cannot be my sister Margaret. She's beautiful and that dragon is hideous. It cannot be her. And so he pulled out his sword and he ran out from behind the rock, yelling his war cry, all ready to attack the dragon. But suddenly the dragon stopped and it looked at him, and instead of breathing fire, a single tear fell from its eye. And then it opened its mouth. And Prince Richard was astonished, for he heard coming out of the dragon's mouth his sister's own voice. And she said, "Oh, quit your sword, forget your fear, and give me kisses 3, for though I am a loathsome beast, no harm I'll do to thee." Well, Prince Richard wasn't really sure what to think of that. He stopped and he thought for a moment, and then he took another couple of steps forward with his sword at the ready. And the dragon opened its mouth again and said, "Oh, quit your sword, forget your fear, and give me kisses 3, for though I am a loathsome beast, no harm I'll do to thee." Well, by this time, Prince Richard was rather close to the dragon, and it could have reached out and swiped at him and killed him, or breathed fire on him and cooked him, but it hadn't done that yet. And every time it spoke with his sister's voice. And so Prince Richard thought, well, it's not attacking me, and it won't hurt anything. It's rather ugly, and I don't really want to do it, but I might as well try. And so stretching out his hand, he touched the dragon on the side of the face, and the dragon didn't move. And then he leaned forward, and 1, 2, 3, he kissed the dragon on its snout. And as soon as he kissed it the second time, the dragon lifted up its head and it roared into the air, and then it began to collapse and crumble down into just a little bit of skin on the ground, and there stood Princess Margaret. And Prince Richard and Princess Margaret were so happy to see one another that they hugged each other, and then they took each other by the hand and they went back to the castle. Well, when they walked into the castle, the queen was having a little feast, a little party with all of her friends. There weren't many of them, but there were a few. And she was so surprised to see Princess Margaret with Prince Richard coming into the castle that she just stopped and stared. And Prince Richard, he did not lose any time. He reached into his jacket and he pulled out a rowan twig and he walked up to the queen and he just touched her on the head with it. And as soon as he touched her on the head, she began to shrivel down and to hiss and to sink, and suddenly it revealed just exactly what she was inside. She was no longer a person. Oh no, now she was a loathsome toad. And that toad hissed and croaked and it hopped off down the stairs outside the castle. Well, as soon as the queen, the wicked queen, was turned back into a loathsome toad, all of her spells broke, and suddenly the king was himself again, and he was no longer under her spell of thinking she was the most wonderful woman in the world. And he was so happy to see Prince Richard and Princess Margaret. He hugged them both, and together they ruled very happily until the end of their days. But do you know, to this day, the loathsome toad haunts the grounds of Bamborough Castle, croaking in dismay every time it sees its own reflection in a puddle. And that is the tale of the loathsome dragon from England. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll come back and join us again on Friday at 3 p.m. Central Time. We will have another story for you from the Milledgeville Public Library of Illinois. See you later, everybody. Bye.